I built the barn in 1987 with my own two hands, and I never told my son what I hid inside the east wall. I want to start there, because everything that happened, the lawyer, the sheriff, the look on my son's face when he realized what I'd done, it all goes back to that wall. My name is Bernard Colt. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a land surveyor for the state of Montana, retired at 62 with a pension that covers the basics, and I've lived on the same 40 acres outside Billings since 1983. I bought the land young when prices were still reasonable out here, and I built everything on it myself. The farmhouse first, then the fence lines, then the barn. I'm not a wealthy man by any stretch, but the land is mine, free and clear, and it's worth considerably more now than what I paid for it. My wife Roseanne used to say that I loved that property more than was healthy for a person. She wasn't wrong. We raised two kids here, my son Nathan and my daughter Patricia, both grown now. Patricia moved to Portland years ago and calls every Sunday without fail. Nathan stayed closer. He lives about 40 minutes east in Laurel with his wife Delia. Ruthann passed 4 years ago, ovarian cancer. It was fast, which was a mercy, though I still reach for her in the morning sometimes and feel nothing but cold sheet. The grief does that. It tricks you into forgetting, and then you remember, and it's like learning it again. After she passed, Nathan started coming around more. I thought it was kindness. I thought he missed his mother the same way I did and just needed to be near the place she'd lived. He'd come out on weekends, help me with fencing, eat dinner, stay late watching football. Delia came too sometimes. She was always pleasant enough, polite in the way that keeps you at a distance. It was about 8 months after Ruthann died that Nathan first brought up the property. We were sitting on the porch, both of us, with a beer, watching the sun go down behind the ridge the way it does in September, turning everything orange and flat. He said it casually, like it was something he'd been thinking about for a while and just happened to mention. He said, "Dad, have you ever thought about putting the land in my name for tax purposes?" I said I hadn't thought about it much. He said, "It might make sense. Estate planning, you know, simplify things down the road." I said I'd think about it. I didn't think about it, or rather I did think about it, and I thought, not yet. The land was mine. Ruthann and I had built our life here. I wasn't ready to sign any of it away to anybody, not even my own son. But Nathan didn't drop it. Over the next year he brought it up again and again, each time slightly differently. Once it was about protecting me from Medicaid clawbacks if I ever needed a nursing home. Once it was about making sure the property wouldn't get tied up in probate. Once it was just him saying, "I worry about you out here alone, Dad. If something happened to you, I'd want to be able to take care of things without red tape." That one almost worked. Because I was alone and I did think about what would happen if I had a fall, or got sick, or couldn't manage the property anymore. Nathan knew that. He knew exactly where to press. It was Patricia who first said something to me directly. She called one Sunday and after a while she said, "Nathan's been talking to Delia's brother. Did you know that?" I said I didn't know that. She said, "Delia's brother is a real estate attorney, Dad. Nathan's been asking him questions about land transfers, about how to contest a will." I was quiet for a moment. She said, "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just thought you should know." I thanked her and hung up and sat with it for a long time. Here is something people don't always understand about getting older. You trust your children. You trust them not because you're foolish, but because you made them, and you watch them grow, and the love you have for them is so deep and so old that it functions almost like a blind spot. It doesn't occur to you to suspect them of something like this. It takes somebody outside it to hand you the lens. I called my attorney, a man named Herschel Webb, who'd handled my affairs for nearly 20 years. I told him what Patricia had said and what Nathan had been asking me. Herschel listened without interrupting, and then he said, "Bernard, I think it's time we talked about a trust." He explained it in plain terms. An irrevocable trust would place the property in a legal structure where I retained the right to live on it for the rest of my life. But no one, not Nathan, not Delia, not anyone, could transfer, sell, or claim it without going through the trust. Any document I signed under duress or in a state of incapacity would be void. The trust would name Patricia and a charitable land conservation organization as co-beneficiaries. Nathan could contest it, but contesting an irrevocable trust that had been properly executed was expensive, slow, and rarely successful. I told Herschel to draw it up. I signed it on a Tuesday in March. I didn't tell Nathan. Then I went home and I did something I hadn't told anyone about in 37 years. I went out to the barn. The east wall of the barn has a false section. I built it that way when I constructed the barn in 1987. Not for any dramatic reason, just because I was young and I liked the idea of a hidden space. Ruth Ann thought I was being eccentric. Maybe I was. I pressed the third board from the bottom on the left side, and the panel swung inward, and there was the space, about the size of a large closet, dry and dark. Over the years I'd stored different things in there. Old survey maps, a rifle I'd inherited from my father, some cash at various points. At some point, I'd run a power line from the barn's main circuit and put in a single outlet and a small light fixture. That March day, I added a few things: a prepaid cell phone, fully charged, a folder containing a printed copy of the trust documents and the contact information for Herschel's office and the local sheriff's department, and a small voice recorder. I closed the panel. I went back inside and made dinner. I want to be honest. I didn't know what I was preparing for exactly. I just knew something was coming. When you spent 3 decades reading land surveys and property lines and boundary disputes, you develop an instinct for when someone is trying to move a line on you. Nathan had been moving a line on me for over a year. I didn't know how far he'd push it. I hoped I was wrong about all of it. I wasn't. It happened on the first Saturday of October. Nathan and Delia came out together, which wasn't unusual. They brought lunch, sandwiches and pie from a place in Laurel that Ruth Ann had liked. That should have told me something right there, because Delia rarely brought food, and when she did it was always something deliberate. We ate at the kitchen table and the conversation was easy, and I let myself relax a little. After lunch, Nathan said he wanted to walk the property line, check the fence on the north side. I said sure, that section had been giving me trouble. We went out together. Delia stayed behind in the kitchen. I didn't notice until we were at the north fence, a good quarter-mile from the house, that Delia wasn't visible anywhere. I looked back and didn't see her. Nathan said, "She's probably just sitting with her coffee." But something felt off. I said I wanted to head back. Nathan said, "In a minute, I actually wanted to talk to you out here." He pulled a folded set of papers from his jacket. He said, "Dad, I need you to sign these." I looked at the papers. They were a transfer deed. My name, Nathan's name, the property description. Professionally formatted, notarized already, the notary line was blank, waiting. I said, "Nathan, what is this?" He said, "It's a deed transfer. I need you to sign it today." His voice had changed, not angry exactly, but flat, resolved, like a man who had made a decision and was past the point of reconsidering it. I said, "I'm not signing anything." He said, "Dad, I know about your accounts. I know what's in them. You can't maintain this property for much longer on your pension, and when you can't, the bank will come for it. I'm trying to protect you." None of that was true. My pension was adequate, and I had savings, but I understood that the truth wasn't the point. I said, "I want to go back to the house." He stepped in front of me. I want to say that clearly because it still turns something cold in my chest when I think about it. My son stepped in front of me. His face was tight and his voice was tight and his voice was tight, and he said, "You're going to listen to me." I said, "Get out of my way, Nathan." He didn't move. He said, "Delia is in the house right now looking for your important documents, your will, your bank papers, your property records. If you sign this deed today, it's clean. Nobody has to know anything. Patricia doesn't have to know. We move forward like adults." I looked at my son for a long moment. I thought about 30-some years of loving him. I thought about the day he was born, and the day he learned to ride a bike, and the way he cried at Ruth Ann's funeral, genuinely cried, and I had held on to that as proof that he was still the boy I raised. I said, "I'm going back to the house." He moved aside. I think he was surprised that I was calm. I was calm because I had already stopped thinking about what he was doing and started thinking about what I needed to do next. When we got back to the house, Delia was in my office, standing at my desk with a drawer open. She looked up when we came in. She didn't apologize or try to explain. She just looked at Nathan. Nathan said, "He won't sign." Delia said, "Then we're doing it the other way." She had found my original will, the old one, before I updated it with Herschel. She sat it on the desk. She said, "This is what we needed. We can work with this." I said, "Both of you need to leave my house." Delia said, "We're not leaving until this is resolved." Nathan said, "Just sign the deed, Dad. Make this simple." I walked toward the back door. Nathan got there first. He locked it. He stood with his back to it. I want you to understand the particular horror of that moment, standing in the house I had built with my son blocking the door and my daughter-in-law going through my papers, 68 years old and being handled like a problem to be managed, like a resource to be extracted. I said very quietly, "I need to get something from the barn." Nathan said, "Whatever it is can wait." Delia said, "Sit down, Bernard." I sat down at the kitchen table. I put my hands flat on the surface and I breathed. I looked at the barn through the window, the east wall of the barn which they did not know existed the way I knew it existed. Nathan sat across from me and started talking again about the property, about costs, about the future, about what was practical. Delia made herself coffee in my kitchen. They were in no hurry. They had locked the back door and they believed they had time. I asked Nathan if I could use the bathroom. He hesitated. Benny said yes. The bathroom window faces the barn. I opened the window. I am 68 and I have not moved through a window in 30 years, but a person is capable of things they didn't know they were capable of when the alternative is losing everything Ruth Ann and I built together. I dropped about 4 feet to the side yard and landed wrong on my left ankle, and it hurt enough that I had to stop for a second and breathe through it. Then I walked to the barn as evenly as I could. I pressed the third board from the bottom on the left side. The panel swung inward. I took the cell phone in the folder with the trust documents and I dialed the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office. The dispatcher was calm and professional. I gave her my name and my address. I told her that my son and daughter-in-law were in my house, that they had locked me inside, and then I had climbed out a window, that they were attempting to coerce me into signing a property deed transfer, and that I had documents showing the property was protected under an irrevocable trust that made any forced transfer legally void. She said, "Are you safe right now, sir?" I said, "I'm in my barn." She said, "Stay there, we're sending a unit." I also called Herschel. He didn't answer, so I left a voicemail explaining the situation and asking him to call the sheriff's number I'd left. Then I sat in the dark of that hidden space, with the light off and the panel slightly ajar, and I waited. I don't know how long it was. 20 minutes maybe. Long enough for Nathan and Delia to notice I was gone. Long enough for me to hear Nathan calling my name from the yard. Long enough that I heard Delia say, sharp and tight, "He's not in the barn. Check the road." They didn't think to check the inside of the east wall. 2 deputies arrived in one vehicle. I heard the truck come up the drive, and I came out of the barn, and one of them saw me and said, "Mr. Colt." I said, "That's me." Nathan was standing in the yard. He looked at the deputies and then at me, and I watched his face go through several things quickly. He tried the explanation. He said he and his wife were just visiting, just having a conversation with his father about estate planning, nothing coercive, nothing illegal. The deputy said, "Sir, your father says you locked him inside the house." Nathan said, "That's not, we didn't lock him in, we were talking." I showed the deputy the trust documents from the folder. I showed him the transfer deed Nathan had tried to get me to sign, which I had put in my pocket during the whole thing without Nathan noticing. The deputy read through it for a moment. He said, "Mr. Colt, you don't have to let these people remain on your property." I said, "I'd like them to leave." Delia tried once more. She said, "Bernard, you're being unreasonable. We were trying to help you." I said, "Herschel Webb will be in contact with you both about what comes next." What came next was this. Herschel returned my call within the hour. He had already pulled the trust documents, and he contacted the county recorder's office to put a formal notice on the property record that any transfer attempt would trigger an automatic challenge. He sent a certified letter to Nathan and Delia the following Monday, detailing the trust structure and informing them that any further attempt to coerce, deceive, or pressure me into signing over property would be reported to the county attorney as elder financial abuse under Montana Code Annotated 52383. Montana takes elder financial abuse seriously. Under that statute, it's a criminal offense, not just a civil one. The penalties include fines and imprisonment. Nathan called me 3 days later. He did not apologize, not exactly. He said he thought I was being stubborn and that I didn't understand what I was getting into financially. I let him talk. When he was done, I said, "Nathan, Herschel has documented everything that happened on Saturday. If you contact me again about the property, he files a report with the county attorney the same day. That's not a threat. It's just what happens." He hung up. Delia has not contacted me. The sheriff's deputies, before they left that Saturday, asked me if I wanted to press charges for the unlawful detention. I thought about it for a while. Nathan had blocked the door. He had prevented me from leaving. Under Montana law, that could constitute unlawful restraint, which carries real weight. I told the deputy I wanted to speak to Herschel before deciding. Herschel advised me that pressing charges would be my right and that the evidence was solid: the locked door, my exit through the window, the transfer deed in Nathan's handwriting, but that it would also mean a criminal proceeding involving my son. I decided not to press charges, not because what Nathan did was acceptable. It was not. But because I am 68 years old and I have been carrying grief for 4 years and I do not want to spend whatever years I have left in courtrooms, the trust protects the land. That was the point. Patricia flew out 2 weeks later. She stayed for 5 days. We walked the property line together and she helped me repair the north fence that Nathan and I had never actually gotten to that morning. She didn't say much about Nathan and I didn't either. Some things don't need to be talked all the way through. On the last evening she was here, we sat on the porch the same way Nathan and I had sat 2 years earlier, with beers, watching the sun go down. She said, "How did you know about the barn?" I told her I built it in 1987, and I always believed that a man should have a place where he kept the things that mattered, somewhere that belonged to only him, somewhere he could get to when he needed it. She thought about that and then she said, "Mom knew, didn't she?" It wasn't really a question. I said, "Your mother knew everything." Ruth Ann had never once mentioned the space to anyone, not in 37 years. I had shown it to her the year we built the barn, and she had looked at it and shaken her head and smiled at me like I was slightly impossible, which I was. And then she had never spoken of it again. That was the thing about Ruth Ann. She understood that some things a person keeps, not out of secrecy, not out of shame, but simply because they need to belong to themselves and no one else. I still go out to the barn most mornings. I check on the animals, check the east fence line, walk the property the way I've walked it for 40 years. The panel is still there, the phone is recharged and sitting in its place. The folder with the trust documents has been updated and reprinted. Some people have asked me since this happened why I didn't tell someone sooner, why I let Nathan keep pressing for over a year before I acted, why I didn't confront him directly. The truth is, I kept hoping I was wrong about him. That is the answer. It is not a complicated answer, but it is the honest one. He is my son, and I loved him, and I kept hoping that the next time he brought up the property, it would be the last time, but something in him would decide against it, that the boy I raised would find his way back to himself. He didn't, and at some point hoping stops being a virtue and starts being a liability. The land is still mine. The barn is still standing. In the mornings when I come out and the light is just starting to come over the ridge and the frost is still on the grass, I think about Ruth Ann, and I think about the 40-some years of work that went into this place, every fence post and every floorboard and every stone in the foundation. A man builds a life the same way he builds a wall, one thing at a time, with his hands, in the right order. And when someone tries to take it from him, the only thing that saves it is having built it well enough in the first place. I built it well. I think about the north fence a lot. Not the confrontation, not the deed Nathan pulled out of his jacket, not the moment he stepped in front of me, but the fence itself. The one we never actually got to that morning. The one Patricia helped me fix 2 weeks later, the two of us working quietly in the October cold, her handing me wire while I stretched it across the post. That's the image that stays. There's something about the way things come back around that I don't think is random. Nathan spent 2 years pressing on me. Softly at first, then harder. And the whole time he was betting that age had made me soft, that grief had made me careless, that a man in his late 60s who lives alone on 40 acres and misses his wife must be easy to move. He was wrong on all 3 counts, and I think he was wrong because of choices I had made long before he ever pulled out those papers. I made a choice in 1987 to build something no one could see. Not out of suspicion. I had no reason to be suspicious of anyone in 1987. But out of a belief that a man should keep something that belongs only to himself. That's not paranoia. That's just the kind of quiet self-possession that I think gets bred out of people when everything in their life is visible, shared, posted, explained. I kept a space for myself. That turned out to matter. I made another choice when Patricia called me. I could have dismissed it. I could have told myself she was stirring up family trouble, that Nathan wouldn't really do what she was suggesting. Instead, I called Herschel the same day. That's the thing about clear thinking. It's not always comfortable. Believing your son is capable of deception is one of the most uncomfortable thoughts a father can hold. But I held it long enough to act on it, and that act saved everything I worked for. And then there's the third thing, which is harder to name but which I feel most clearly when I walk the property in the early morning. Ruth Ann is gone. My son is estranged. The family I imagined for this place is not the family I have. And I am still here, still walking the fence line, still making coffee and sitting on the porch and watching the ridge go orange at sundown. That's not stubbornness. That's something more like deciding to remain. Deciding that the grief and the disappointment do not get to be the last word about what this land means and what my life here means. Nathan made his choices too. He chose to listen to Delia's brother instead of his iron conscience. He chose to lock a door. He chose to believe that what I had built over 40 years was just an asset to be transferred and not a life that deserved to continue on its own terms. Those choices have consequences that I didn't have to impose. They're already written into what he no longer has. He doesn't have my trust. He doesn't have Patricia's respect. He doesn't have the thing he came for. That's not punishment. That's just how it works when you treat people as obstacles instead of as people. I don't know what Nathan tells himself about that Saturday. I don't know if he's ashamed or if he's just moved on to the next plan. What I know is that I'm here and the barn is standing and the panel in the east wall swings open the same way it always has. Ruth Ann knew about that wall for 37 years and never told a soul. That was her way of loving me, giving me the thing that was mine and asking nothing about it. I think about that when I walk out there in the mornings. A man builds a life the same way he builds a wall, one thing at a time, in the right order, with his hands. And if he builds it well enough, it holds.